What's up, everyone out there in YouTube world, Facebook world, social media world? Welcome to another edition of Musings with MGL. Today, we're going to talk about something that is superly insane. Everybody obviously knows in the gun community, the Second Amendment community, about this new bill that crazy Representative Shiela Jackson Lee down there in Houston, Texas, has proposed. I got to go to the glasses because I can't see. Has proposed as it relates to firearms, okay? So it's been a couple of weeks now. I'm a little late behind the ball, but I've been kind of busy. But I just wanted to give my take on this whole issue with what they call H.R. 127. So Shiela Jackson Lee is a crazy representative from Texas. You've probably seen pictures of her. She likes to wear crazy cowboy hats, and she said some really crazy things before in the past. She comes out of Texas, but she comes out of Houston, which is kind of a liberal part of Texas. So she has recently introduced what is called H.R. 127, which is also known as the Shabika Sheikh Firearm Licensing and Registration Act. Shabika Sheikh was a Pakistani exchange student who was killed in 2008 during the Santa Fe High School massacre. And the point of this bill is to provide for the licensing of firearms and ammunition possession and the registration of firearms to prohibit the possession of certain ammunition. I'm going to run through a couple of the quick crazy things that are in here, and then I'm going to give my take on what's going on here. So H.R. 127 establishes a federal firearms registration system that will be accessible by federal, state, and local governments, including the military, even the general public. So in other words, it creates a firearm registration system that would be in a computer that anybody would be able to access: military, governments, cops, and the general public. So if you wanted to know if your neighbor has a firearm, you can look up your neighbor and see if he has a firearm, et cetera, et cetera. Basically like registered sex offenders. So you know how you can, if you want to see if there's a sex offender in your neighborhood, you can go to a website and see what's around you. My guess is they'd like something like that for firearm owners. The system will track the make, model, and serial number of all firearms, their owners, the dates they were acquired, and where they are being stored. The system will also track firearm loans. I don't mean monetary loans, but like if I wanted to loan my firearm to my friend to use for the week to go hunting, that type of loan. So it will track firearm loans, including the ID of the loan recipient and for how long it is being loaned. This bill applies retroactively, so current firearm owners will have 3 months to supply their gun information to the federal government from the bill's effective date. It also establishes a federal licensing requirement. Applicants will have to be at least 21, undergo a NICS background check, complete a psychological evaluation, complete 24 hours of firearms training, and pay $800 for firearms insurance from the government. You got all that? For the psychological evaluation, a licensed psychologist will interview individuals' spouses, including former spouses, and at least 2 other family members or associates to, quote, further determine the state of the mental, emotional, and relational stability of the individual in relation to firearms. Licenses will be denied to individuals hospitalized for issues such as depressive episodes. No duration for license disability is specified, and it does not matter whether the individual sought help voluntarily. It will also establish licensing requirements for the display of antique firearms and for the right to possess, quote, military-style weapons. To display an antique, applicants must have to prove they own an antique firearm, describe how they will display it, and demonstrate that they have, quote, safe storage for it. So a lot of these, you go to these cool restaurants that might have old antique firearms on the wall, or you go to gun shops that might have old cool antique firearms on the wall, or hell, if you go to a hunting lodge or whatever, even your own house, if you want to put some old antique firearm up on the wall for display, you have to tell them about the firearm, prove that it's antique, describe to them how you will display it, and make sure that it's safe so that people can't get access to it. To possess a, quote, military-style weapon, so of course we all know they use that crazy phrase to cover everything they don't like, applicants will have to undergo 24 hours of safety and live fire training. It is unclear whether this training is in addition to the base 24 hours of training required to possess firearms and ammunition. Quote, military-style weapons are defined as they are under assault weapons bans like those in California and New Jersey's. Weapons are identified by name or because they possess 2 or more features found on commonly owned modern semi-automatic firearms such as an adjustable stock, pistol grip, etc. It also criminalizes the possession of large capacity magazines, which is anything higher than 10 rounds, and ammunition that is greater than 50 caliber. So if you can't own a 50 caliber firearm or higher. And one of the biggest kickers in this is that there is no grandfather clause to Jackson Lee's bill. What grandfather clause, for those of you who don't know, means that you can't do it retroactively. So if they pass the bill today and you currently own all these firearms, then you don't have to go register them because you were grandfathered in, because you existed before the law existed. What it normally is it applies to people going forward. So if you buy a new gun after the law passes, you have to register that. But if you owned a firearm before the law passes, you were grandfathered in and don't have to register it. Most laws that are passed have grandfather clauses because it's not fair for somebody to have done an act that was legal and then all of a sudden that act becomes illegal because a law passed. So they usually allow people to be grandfathered in. That's what they did with the assault weapons ban in the 90s. There was actually a grandfather clause that if you already owned an assault weapon, you didn't have to turn it in. It was just for people buying new ones going forward. So that removes the grandfathering clause. So that means if you have an old rusting .22 rifle sitting in one of your closets, you will have to comply with all the provisions of the bill or face heavy fine and possible imprisonment. Okay. So now, obviously the bill's crazy. Okay. It's extremely draconian. It would never hold up to constitutional muster. Everything about it, essentially every line in it, is unconstitutional, and there's no way the current makeup of the Supreme Court would, in my opinion, do anything differently. But here's what I think is going on here. All right, so as a lawyer, I do criminal law and family law and some personal injury law, whatever. It's basically what you see here is what is an old standard fashion negotiation tactic. So let's take criminal law, for example. You get a guy that's charged with a crime, and the prosecutor comes to you and says, I'll give him 100 years in prison. And you think, what? That's crazy. There's no way that what this guy did is worth 100 years in prison. You're insane. So they come out and they throw this crazy offer out there. Or when you sue somebody for personal injury, you say, I want $1 million, et cetera, et cetera. So you start out with the most craziest, over-the-top offer that you can throw out there. So the other side just thinks you're nuts. So that way, when the prosecutor comes back to you in a couple months and says, you know what, I thought it over, you're right, 100 years is not good, I'll offer him 50. Now, you came into the situation thinking, look, this case is crap. It might be worth 10 years in prison. Maybe the guy deserves that, or 5 years. But because they've come out there and thrown out that 100-year number, they've shocked your system. They've so shocked your clients' fear that they might get 100 years in prison, that when they come at you and say 50, all of a sudden it looks like a reasonable middle ground, good offer. Okay. And again, you do the same thing in personal injury. You ask for $1 million, and then that way when they freak out that they might have to pay you $1 million, and you come back and say, okay, I'll take $500,000. Well, your case may only be worth like 100,000 or 50,000, but now your $500,000 offer looks reasonable compared to where you started. So that's what's happening here. The Democrats have a history of throwing out crazy things like that. They get one basically crazy member who throws out the most craziest, far left, insane idea. And that way, when the other Democrats, who are the quote moderates, come back and say, yeah, that's crazy, I don't think we should do all that, we should do this. And then guess what? They look like the reasonable moderate people. Okay. This bill is so crazy. It doesn't have a single co-sponsor. There's not even a single Democrat who's co-sponsored this bill with her, because even the Democrats know that it's never going to pass because it's crazy. Now, I think a lot of them secretly in their heart, this is what they believe, and they would love to have a bill like this, but they also know they can never pass it. We just saw something similar a few months ago with this Green New Deal concept, right? You get the crazy AOC out there who throws out this insane Green New Deal bill that says we're going to get rid of airplanes, we're going to get rid of trains, we're going to get rid of buildings, cows, cars, et cetera, et cetera. So they come out with these crazy bills where they're going to get rid of everything, and then all of a sudden you get somebody like a Joe Biden that comes in there and they're like, oh, I don't want to do all that. What I want to do is I just want to cancel the Keystone Pipeline. Or I want to start solar-powered plants, or I want to start windmill plants or whatever. Then all of a sudden that looks like the normal, reasonable position. Whereas if you started with that position, you might say, wait a minute, that's normal. That's crazy. We want to be over here. But when you start with a position that's way over here, you ask for the 100 years. Then when you come back later on and ask for the 50 years, it all looks normal and reasonable. So that's what I believe is going on here with this bill. This bill particularly is never going to pass But don't you kid yourself. In a few months, you're going to see something come out that's not even close to this bill, and they're going to claim, look, we think that that's crazy. We would never do anything like that. Nobody wants to have you register all of your guns. We just want to have you register these guns. So now we look like the reasonable compromisers in the middle. So don't be fooled for this, okay? Everybody's getting all worked up about this bill. This is crazy. I can't believe this is what they're going to do. This bill is not the bill. This bill is their opening $1 million offer, and what they're waiting for is for you to get so freaked out about it and say, "I can't believe they would do that." That when they come back in 6 months or a year or whatever and start tackling gun control, and their provisions are not this far over, but only a little bit far over, people are going to start saying, "Well, at least it's reasonable because it's not as crazy as where they started from." And they're going to claim, "Look, we compromised. We came to the middle. So why don't you come to the middle and agree that we can register these firearms and not these?" So that's what's going on here. So don't worry yourself too much about this bill. What you need to worry about is the next bill that's coming. Okay, so thanks for watching again. Subscribe, hit the bell notification, like, comment, share, everything you need to do. I really appreciate the help growing the channel. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, carry on.